Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Barcoding Solutions for any NAV configuration webinar. I'm Michael and Trevor Toll, the Marketing Manager for Solution Systems. Today we have customers and others attending this webinar, so just a bit about Solution Systems before we begin. We're located in Rolling Meadows, Illinois, and we have been in business for 35 years providing software, IT infrastructure, and web development to organizations in the Chicagoland area, as well as Wisconsin, Indiana, and the Midwest region. We are a gold certified Microsoft partner. We sell, implement, and support an ERP software called Microsoft Dynamics NAV. NAV is a business accounting software that is geared toward manufacturers, distributors, and service companies. We also sell, implement, and support CRM, as well as outsource IT services to our customers. Today we are very fortunate to have Mark Hamlin with us from Dynamic Manufacturing Solutions. Mark will be conducting this Barcoding Solutions overview, so I'm going to pass it over to him now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm just going to put through a brief PowerPoint just to sort of tee us up, and then we'll jump directly into the demo here. So just bear with the old power snooze here for a few minutes. All right, a little bit about DMS. We were founded in 2008, so we've been around for a while, and really what we do is we focus on barcoding for manufacturing and warehouse. What we'll be looking at today is primarily the warehouse side, but if you have shop floor data collection requirements on the manufacturing side, time, labor, those sorts of things, we can handle that as well. So just contact Mike after the fact if you have any questions on that specifically. So a little bit about what we're going to talk about today is really the reason you're here is likely you have some issues with managing the data in your warehouse. And really that bad data is costing you money. So something like barcoding is going to be able to go in there and simplify that data collection. So you're going to have more timely data, more accurate data, and ideally, if you're using a system like the one you'll see today that's real time, you're going to have the errors and all sorts of feedback presented in real time as the people are doing the scanning versus an hour later when you upload the information into the system. Okay, so that data collection really can help reduce your costs, improve the error management of picking, all of those sorts of things. But we can actually do a lot more than that, right? So simple data acquisition is great. That's been around since the 60s. What we need is to be able to take that at least one step beyond. And what we're talking about is being able to act on the information that's out there in the shop floor. So for example, somebody goes out to a bin, tries to scan an item, pick an item, and it doesn't allow him to do it. Well, what do you do today? You write it down on a piece of paper, and an hour later it ends up in the warehouse supervisor's office, and he has to try and figure out what happened. Ideally, we'd provide enough information on the shop floor to allow those guys to act on the information that's being presented to them, right? So really, that's what we call the shop floor decision support. And really what it does is you'll see when we go through the demo, it's a richer interface. It provides more context around what the guys are seeing so that they actually make decisions and handle the issues on the shop floor versus having to write it down on their hand and talk to the supervisor later on in the day. All right. So the tool we'll be looking at that does that is what we call the mobile WMS or mobile decision support. So really what it does is that data acquisition we talked about earlier. So anything that you want to capture in the warehouse, fix, put away, shipping, receiving, any of those processes you deal with, we can capture. And it works with any NAV setup. So whether you have those picks enabled or not, whether you have warehouse or inventory picks enabled or not, we'll adapt to your configuration, and the devices will reflect the processes you want to manage in the shop. We have some additional functionality like license plating and advanced inventory counts and things like that. It's functionality that's not available in NAV. So we're not just going out and replicating, what you can do in the NAV client out on the shop floor. we're actually going out and building on top of that to give you more advanced warehouse capabilities than what you would find out of the box. The last couple things here are nice because it is because of all the reasons listed in this slide. Now, if you already have 1D barcodes like UPC codes or Code 39 or any of those barcodes, we can still read those. We can read vendor barcodes. You know, anything that you have in your environment, we can use. If you're starting from scratch, we're going to say use these 2D barcodes because we can incorporate a lot more information in them. Okay, we're all done, and let's get to the actual demo here. All right, so what you see on the screen is actually a device that I'm holding in my hand. So I've got this actual device in my hand right now, and as you see the screen change, it'll be because you know, I'm tapping the screen or scanning barcodes. Right? And what you see on this are all the different modules that are available within the system. So, you know, these are some of that I mentioned in the slide earlier, but we've got things like inventory inquiry, which allows us to drill down from other documents to get more details about what's happening. And really, if we find a barcode somewhere and we scan it, this module is going to tell us what that barcode is and more detail about it. And I'll jump into these and show you them in more detail in a second. Shipping and receiving, again, depending on your configuration, that might be receiving directly against a PO, or it might be receiving against a warehouse receipt. So whichever one is enabled within NAV for your location, this will reflect that selection. Same thing with picks and putaways. So if you're in a location that doesn't have picks and putaways enabled, then these guys are going to be grayed out. In this particular case, the location that I'm using within NAV has everything turned on. So that's why everything here is enabled. What I can do, though, I'll just give you a quick example. I'm going to scan a barcode that's going to log me in to a different location within NAV. So if I scan that, it reloads the configuration, and you'll see here that as soon as it does that, the logo changes a little bit. It says Blue Warehouse at the top here because in NAV this is the Blue Warehouse and their demo data. And you'll notice that I've got a few things that are disabled now, like pick and put away, because I don't have those enabled within this Blue Warehouse. So it's the same company, just a different warehouse. I'll go back to the one I was in before that has everything enabled and load up this guy. So picks and putaways, that'll be inventory picks or warehouse picks, depending on how you've got it set up. If you don't use picks at all and you just pick to, say, a sales order or a transfer order, you'll just pick directly within the shipping module. Down here in moves, the movement allows us to do ad hoc movements. So for example, if somebody's in the warehouse, they want to move product from one area of the warehouse to another, they can essentially scan that, move it, and then post it, and that will record the movement within NAV. So if you have bins enabled, of course, that lets you move from one bin to another. If you have, you know, virtual locations within your physical location, like let's say you have a QC or a quarantine or a scrap location, not a bin, but a location in your warehouse, this will also allow you to move into those locations. So I can move from one location to another as well. If you're running directed pick, like the full WMS and NAV, then you can actually use the movement document in NAV as well as the ad hoc movements, right? So somebody in the office can define a warehouse movement based on your bin min maxes and whatever criteria you specify, and then somebody on a handheld can just go and execute that particular instruction. Production I mentioned briefly earlier. I won't get into that into too much detail here, but again, that lets us do consumption and output, and it has some nice additional features beyond what standard NAV can do, like better serial number handling and lot number handling, so I can track exactly which input serial number goes to which output serial number and those sorts of things that NAV doesn't do out of the box. License plating we talked about, and again, it's used for within the receiving and warehouse management side to build up pallets of product to move around and to store. It also handles intercompany shipments of license plates, so if you're shipping from one company to another in NAV, that license plate can be shipped that way. And then on the shipping side, and I'll show you a little later, we can actually do the pick and pack where we're actually picking directly to a box that's going to be used for shipment, okay, which saves a ton of time and redundant handling of the product. The scratch pad, that is for offline processing. So that said, of course, everything else here is in real time, so we're on Wi-Fi. So as long as we're connected, we can essentially do anything here in real time. And the advantage of that, of course, is that when somebody scans something, we're executing the NAV business logic in real time, including any of the customizations you might have in the system. And that gives the person real-time feedback if they're trying to do something that's not possible or that's unexpected. In batch mode, like with the scratch pad, they can scan everything, and when you upload it back into NAV and try and execute it, you might have errors and you might have to go back and figure out what exactly happened. But we do provide that capability where if you're, doing an inventory count at a customer site or something like that, or you're scanning product in the yard, you can actually do it offline. Incidentally, on the shipping side, we have a point of sale module within shipping that also has an offline component. So if you're out at a customer's location and you're scanning in product for an order for them, we can do that offline, and it'll automatically sync with NAV when you're back online. Okay. The inventory count module, this is we have two versions. We have a basic one that just works with the physical inventory journal in NAV, and the advanced one, which gives you the better reconciliation tools, the audited recounts if you want to use them, and a number of other features that are very important for anybody that's serious about doing inventory counts, both cycle counts and full inventory counts. Okay, and both the inventory count module and the license plate module you can purchase independently from the handheld. So you can do the inventory count as a paper-based tool and still get all the advantages of the reconciliation and audit trails and all those sorts of things that you don't get out of standard NAV. All right, now that's a lot of blah blah blah. Let's actually see what this thing can do. So what I'll do is I'm just going to tap the inventory management menu item there, and that brings up a screen where it actually lets me type something in or just scan a barcode. Now, in general, we don't want people touching the screen. So I tap that menu item, and that's fine. Occasionally, you will tap the screen to access certain functionality. But in general, what we want is people using barcodes and the numeric keypad and the enter key, and that's really effectively all we want people touching, because it's a lot more efficient. People don't have to take their gloves off or any of that sort of thing. All they do is scan a barcode, potentially enter a quantity, and hit enter. Now in this case, we have edit boxes here, because if a barcode is damaged, I might want to type in the item number and then reprint it from the handheld device. So it does allow you to enter the bin or the item number at this point. But it doesn't really matter what I've got selected. So I've got the cursor flashing in the bin thing here, but I'm actually going to scan an item barcode. And the system is smart enough to know what I've scanned and to bring up the appropriate screen. So the first time I do it, it takes a second. I'll do it again so you can see it's pretty much instant in real life. So this particular item I scanned, it's got this quantity in stock, 229, and it gives me my bin breakdown of everywhere it's located within the warehouse. Okay. There's a few other things I can see here. So on the transactions, I can see recent transactions for that particular item and reservations as well. So by default, this brings in any reservation entries and transactions for the item. Any of these columns here are all configurable. So if you want to see additional columns or fewer columns or whatever you like, for the most part, you can configure those in, or your partner can go in and add whatever you want to see in these screens. Okay. If we look at the picture, I can either upload pictures to the device, or what it's doing in this case is it's pulling the pictures directly out of NAV and caching them locally on the device. And the picture is nice because you can actually have a visual verification where I can turn on, when I'm doing pics, this picture shows up for however many seconds I specify, so that when we've got staff that maybe aren't familiar with the product lines or anything like that, or if you have temporary workers, when they scan that barcode, they can visually verify what they're picking matches what's expected. Okay, so there's that visual verification to make sure that things aren't labeled incorrectly or any of that sort of thing. Okay, if I go back to the details here, I scan that item. At this point, I could scan a different item, and you notice I don't have to choose an edit box or anything. I don't have to select a field to scan into. I just scan. It knows what I'm doing, and it brings up this next item. Now, you notice this one has a lot number within it. So the barcode I scanned had that lot number in the barcode. So the nice thing about the 2D codes is we can encode lot numbers, expiration dates, item numbers, everything into a single barcode. If you don't have that, so maybe your vendor provides you with boxes that have an item number and a separate barcode for a lot number or serial number, no problem. We can handle that as well, easily enough. And if you scan that lot number barcode that doesn't have any other information, assuming you have unique lot numbers, we'll just bring up the item number that's associated with that lot number. Now, a couple of things we can do here. On the menus, these menus are configurable as well. So you can go in and just directly within NAV, and maybe I'll just jump to that department. So here's the warehouse mobile department in NAV. You can see we've got the ability to set up menus and columns and all those sorts of things. So within these menus, I can come in and I can add my own menus, and I can select what I want to print when I hit this print button. So there's standard report selections as well. So if I hit print here, this will print whatever I specified as a report selection. So either a barcode label potentially, maybe it's a QA sheet, whatever you like. And you can have multiple print menu items if you want. It's your call. You can have whatever you want in this menu. Now, the other thing I mentioned, we don't want necessarily people having to tap the screen to get to that menu. So here, in order to say print, I'd have to hit menu and tap the print button. Well, I can also assign function keys to any of these menu items. So let's say I want to make print F3. Every time I hit F3, doesn't matter what screen I'm on, it does print. I can do that. And then all I have to do is hit the F3 button that's on the keypad, and it executes that action. Okay, so really, we're trying to make it as efficient as possible for the guys on the shop floor to use the devices, right? One-handed operation, don't have to remove gloves, any of those sorts of things, very, very simple to use. I will mention something else here since I'm on an item with a lot number. You'll notice we've got that lot information entry there. I can go in and record lot information as well. If this is mandatory on receipt, it'll pop this up and force me to specify some lot information for the product I'm receiving. Otherwise, I can go in here and given that I have the appropriate security, I can come in and I can update this lot information. And if you add your own custom fields in there, they just get picked up automatically on the handheld and everything else. Okay. Now, from here, I can do a couple of things. But one of the things I'm going to do is to scan a bin barcode. So at this point, I scan a bin, and it tells me everything that's in that particular bin. And again, all of this is configurable, so if you don't use variant codes and you want to see something else, maybe you want to see the bin quantity by lot number, that's actually just a configuration setting, but then we can show the lot number field instead. So there's lots of things you can do there as far as what you see when you scan a bin barcode. You'll also notice at the bottom there we've got license plates. If there were any pallets within this bin, it would list all the pallets there, and I'd be able to drill down and get details on what's on those specific pallets as well. Okay, so that's the basics around the inventory inquiry. And really it's a foundational screen, so it's very simple. You scan a barcode, it gives you information about it, and that's basically it. But it does illustrate a few things about how the system works, like the menus and the fields, and the fact that you don't actually have to choose, an edit box to scan into or anything like that. You just scan a barcode, it knows what you're trying to do, and it does it. Okay. Now let's look at something more. A common activity, of course, in the warehouse is a pick. So let's just jump straight to the picks. Okay. So from here, I have a couple of options. Number one, if you're using paper picks in the shop to sort of act as a trigger, so So you still produce the paper-based pick for the guys to use to say, okay, these are the things I need to pick. I could just scan a barcode on that picking list right now, okay, to bring up the pick. Or alternatively, if you want to go more paperless, I could just hit the little search button there, and what it'll do is it'll bring up all the picks available to me, depending on how you've got the, the user logged in and the configuration and everything else. So these are all the picks available for this particular user. And again, we're going to have different fields up here. Assigned to is a common one, but we can have all sorts of stuff like due date or whatever you like. Okay. So at that point, I could choose a pick directly from there, and I'll show you what it looks like if I scan the pick. It's basically the same. I just scan a pick, and it brings it up on the screen. So once I've got the pick up on the screen, fairly straightforward. And again, the columns are configurable, but it shows me what I need to pick and where I need to get it from. And this is a small example of that rich interface that I talked about. So it shows you the full context of that pick. I know everything that I'm supposed to pick on this particular document. I'm not, paging one item at a time. I get to see everything that's here. So as an example, I'm looking at this, and I don't want to start with this first bin here. I happen to be on the other side of the warehouse. I want to start with this last bin. This screen gives me the information to know everything I have to do in this particular activity. So what I'm going to do is exactly that. I'm going to start with that second bin there. So I don't have to choose that line or anything else. I just walk up to the bin that I want to pick from and scan it. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan the wrong bin first. So I accidentally scanned the bin beside it. And it tells me immediately that you're not allowed to do that. You can't pick from that bin because it's not represented on that particular pick. And I'll actually show you something in a sec. If I did actually have to pick from that bin, I just scanned how you would do that. But let's say, okay, now I scan the right bin. So what I do is I scan that bin W412. The system knows what I did. I scanned a bin. It finds the first line on the pick that has that bin, and then I need to scan the item that I'm actually picking out of that particular bin. So I do that, and what it does is it shows a picture for a second there. I've got that configured to pop up the picture as a visual verification, and then allows me to specify a quantity. Now this quantity here, just through configuration on the configuration, we can have a default to the quantity on the pick. We can have a default to a quantity of 1. We can have a default to a quantity of 1 and not even show this dialog, which means I have to scan each one I pick. Like, so if I need to pick 4, I would scan 4 barcodes, and it would just decrement the number remaining by 1 each time. In this case, I've got it set up to come in as a default of 0, which means I have to specify the quantity I'm picking. So really all I do is from the keypad, I just enter the quantity I'm picking, and I'm done. And we can see here on the screen how many I have left to pick, how many I've picked so far, and everything else. Now, that's real time with NAV. So if I actually went into this pick in NAV and looked it up, you would see exactly in NAV what I see on the screen. The quantity handled is going to be 10, or the quantity to handle is going to be 10, and the quantity remaining is going to be 1, right? So that's real time. I can see that in NAV in real time. Okay, so that's really the pick operation. You scan the bin, you scan the item, optionally specify a quantity, and you move on. And then from this point, maybe that's all I want to pick, and I move on. Or maybe at this point, I decide that, you know what, there are no more in this bin. There's an issue. There's a problem. I can't pick any more than what I picked out of that bin. What do I do now? Okay. So the first thing I might want to do is I might want to drill down on this to see where else this item might be located. So I've actually got it set up to be the F8 key. So I hit F8 and it'll drill down. Or what I can do is I can just tap that line there, and I can choose one of the options from here. So let's say I just hit Item Inquiry. What it does is it drills down to that particular item and shows me where else I might be able to find it. Okay? Or if I want to drill down to the particular bin, it's F9. So in this case, I'll just hit F9 rather than press the thing. And it tells me more information about what I can expect to find in that bin. So this bin is supposed to have 19 of those. I was only able to pick 1. All right? So at that point, I can now go to the bin where I expect this to find, the remaining part of that item and pick it from there. So I can actually split the line, which means, you know, if you're familiar with the picks in NAV, what this will do is it'll create a new line with a new bin that I can pick from, or I can just change this bin directly and pick the remaining out of the other bin. The other interesting thing I can do from here is this last thing that's this add note. So clearly I ran into a problem here. I couldn't pick out of that bin. Maybe I want to let somebody know that there was an issue. The interesting thing about this add note is that that's not technically part of the product. This is something I added in myself, and it's a plugin. I didn't have to modify any of the base product code or anything else. I wrote my own little bit of business logic, a few lines of code, and plugged it in completely externally, and here it is available and fully integrated. So what I do when I hit add note is I'm using standard text to nav. So what I'm going to do is I've got abbreviations that I've set up as standard text to nav, and one of them is BE for bin empty. So I'm going to say bin empty, and I'm going to go, you know, it was bin, 412 as an example. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong key. At any rate, you get the general idea. I added a note from the system, and what that actually does, it's actually kind of useful. It actually goes in. Actually, I lied. When I hit the wrong key, I hit escape, so it didn't actually add the note. So let's do bin empty, and I'll just go, you know, I'm frustrated. So I'm going to do that. Oops. Well, that would explain what I'm doing wrong. Let me just back up here. There we go. So I'm frustrated, so I put a nasty note there, hit OK. And then what that does in NAV, if we come in here, it adds that note right here, associates it with the appropriate document. I can click on it and bring up that document in NAV. So little things like that illustrate, okay, now the guy doesn't have to write something on the back of his hand to follow up with later. He can let the warehouse supervisor know immediately what's going on, and the warehouse supervisor sees it in their screen. They can bring it up, and also the ability to extend the system without the use of your partner or us or anybody else, and it doesn't have any impact on upgrading your system down the road. And incidentally, here's what I mentioned. In real time, we can see, you know, quantity handle and you know, everything else that's available in real time within that. Okay, on this pick. All right. At this point, if we're interactive, I'd ask if there's any questions, but I'm just going to keep rambling for a while, and we can cover questions off at the end. A couple other things to mention on here. I mentioned the license plating. If I'm doing picking, this is actually where I'd create a package that I'm picking into. So I could hit create, and I could start picking and build up that package. And then when I'm done, I'd create a new one and start picking to that package. And then, again, when I'm shipping, I can go in and I know exactly what the contents of each package are, how many packages I have, all of those sorts of things. And if we look at what that looks like in NAV, this one's not very interesting. It's only got one item in that particular package, but it tells me things like what the current weight is, you know, based on the item weight, what the count is, you know, if I'm doing ASNs, what the status of the EDI is, all of those sorts of things that I can use within shipping. Okay, so I'm actually building up that package that is shipping ready on the fly. In a lot of systems, what you're forced to do is you pick everything, you stage it in shipping, and at that point, they have some sort of fixed terminal that they, you know, start building up packages. So all that, you're handling the material twice. It's a huge waste of time. There's no reason to do that. Okay, and finally, we can also post documents from the handheld device. So at this point, on a pick, this happens to be a warehouse pick, but I can register that document directly from the handheld device. If I'm in the shipping module, I can actually post a sales shipment as well, or a transfer shipment. If I'm on the receiving side, I can post a purchase receipt from the handheld device. Okay. And on the shipping side, it's kind of nice because I can hit post, it posts the shipment, and at the printer by the shipping bay, it prints out all the documents I need to you know, package that shipment up and send it. So you don't have to have, you know, a PC or anything that the guys have to go back to and generate all their documentation. They can do it all from the handheld device. Okay. All right, so let's look at receiving a little bit, since I mentioned it. Same idea here. In receiving, I can either scan a PO, or if your vendors are nice enough to put a barcode on their packing slips with your PO number, you could scan that. Otherwise, I can do a lookup, and what it'll do is it'll bring up all the transfer orders, purchase orders, everything in the system, and the warehouse receipts. If I don't have a warehouse receipt, assuming you're using those, for a purchase order, so this is standard NAV demo data, this is out-of-the-box NAV demo data, this happens to be a purchase order. If I chose that and there were no receipts for it, it would automatically create the warehouse receipt for me on the fly. Okay, so you don't have to pre-create anything. So I'll just bring up that PO, and you'll notice that when I do bring it up, this is a big one, it's got a couple hundred lines on it, you'll notice that it's actually generated a warehouse receipt for me automatically, receipt number 8. But here it's pretty straightforward. It works exactly the same way you know, any of the other modules work. You know, the way you'd expect. The only difference is when we're using directed pick and put away, which is what I'm using, there's no requirement to scan the bin. I can if I like, but we've got a default receipt bin, so everything I'm doing, I'm receiving into the default receipt bin. So at this point, all I'd really have to do is scan the item that I find. And again, I don't have to go in and select the item I want to receive on the screen. I just scan the barcodes that are coming out of that vendor's box. So as an example, I'll scan this guy here, which is way down near the bottom of the PO, and it asks me for a quantity. I'll just enter 1. You'll notice that based on the scroll bar, it's way down at the bottom. I didn't have to go find that or anything else. I just scan the barcode. The system selects the line that it matches and allows me to specify the quantity. Okay. If I scan something that's lot tracked, so this guy here is lot tracked, and we see we get a slightly different interface here for entering the quantity. Because it's lot tracked, and this particular barcode actually had the lot number in it. If it didn't have the lot number in it, this field here would be selected, and I'd scan a secondary barcode for the lot number. Or if you have the system automatically generate the lot numbers as you receive it, it will auto-generate the lot number for you. Okay? But it allows them to come in and specify lot number, expiration date, quantity, and again, that lot information. So if I have lot information mandatory, what it'll do is it'll, and I don't actually, unfortunately, on this particular item, what it'll do is it'll pop up that lot information screen and force me to specify the lot information. So, you know, any quality or additional fields, or if you've got a certificate number or anything like that that you need to record on receipt, it would ask you for that information as I'm receiving it. Okay. One question we get a lot of is, well, what happens if the things I receive from my vendor aren't barcoded? How do I deal with that? Well, we have a couple of options. One is, from here, I could hit a print button, and I could print barcode labels for all of these items that are on the PO. And we have some people that have a separate field that indicates how many labels are required per line, that sort of thing. But essentially, I can hit print. It'll print the labels. The guys can affix them to the product, and then I scan them in to receive it. Or it's a setting within the configuration that I can turn on or off. I'm also able to just hit this. Sorry, you didn't see what I did because I'm tapping the screen. So let me back up a step. Oops. I backed up one too many steps. I can also hit the quantity button on the screen, and if I've allowed people to do that, I can enter quantities without actually scanning the product. Okay. Don't recommend it because you don't get that physical verification. You know, he might tap this button to enter a quantity here, but you know, maybe he's actually grabbed the wrong line to enter the quantity against, and then you get invalid data in your system. Far better to enforce the scanning of the product. But we do have that option where I don't necessarily have to scan the item. I could choose the line, and I could just tap the quantity button and enter the quantities. Okay. The other options on here, similarly with the license plate, I can receive everything onto a pallet. And again, that can be mixed product on a pallet, mixed lot numbers, everything else. And that'll generate the single barcode that I can scan to then put it away, to move it, to transfer it, to consume it in production, those types of things. All right. That's basically it on receiving. And again, I've got all that same capability. If I want more information about this particular item for whatever reason, I can hit in my case, the F8 key and drill down, or the F9 key to look at the contents of this bin, those types of things. But generally, it's very easy. You've got a receipt here, or a PO, or a transfer order, depending on how your system is set up. You scan the items, you optionally specify the quantity, and you're off to the races. When you're done, if you've given the guys on the shop floor the permission to do it, they can hit post, and the transaction's complete. Very simple. Okay. All right. The last thing I'll cover real quick is the inventory count. Everything else is largely the same sort of interface. The move is slightly different because I scan a from and a to in there, but what that allows us to do is actually approximate the advanced warehousing capabilities in NAV without having to turn them on. So for example, I can receive off a PO into a receiving bin and then do a put away by using the movement functionality. And that saves me from having to turn on the inventory putaways, which have some side effects you may not like, or turning on the warehouse putaways, which means that I also have to turn on warehouse receipts. So just by receiving to a PO, I can still do that sort of two-stage receiving where I receive it and then do a secondary putaway by using the movement functionality. So there's actually quite a bit you can do with that movement capability. Okay, but other than that, most of it works essentially the same way. So I'm just going to jump into the inventory count and show you what that looks like. Okay. So again, the way it works is I can just scan a barcode that's already on a document. So if you want to hand out pre-printed inventory count sheets, you can. But otherwise, what I would do is I would do a lookup, and it lists all the count sheets that are available in the system. And these are all defined in NAV. As I mentioned, there's a separate count module in NAV that handles all of this. But I would go in and I would choose, if I'm part of Team A, I would choose that count sheet. And it loads up everything that's on that count sheet so far. Okay, so these are things that I've already counted. Okay, you can see the quantity in there. And effectively, to do the inventory count, all I do is if I'm in charge of counting, the W47 area or the W4 area, all I do is I walk up to the bin in the area that I'm counting. I scan the bin. I scan the item that I need to count. Let's pick one that I may not have counted yet. That guy there. I scan the item I want to count, and I enter the quantity, and that's basically it. Okay, so that's all there is to the inventory count on this. What happens here is all of this information, again, is put into NAV in real time. All the reconciliation, so comparing what serial numbers you missed, which ones you overcounted, all those sorts of things, that's all handled within NAV. But as far as the guys on the shop floor doing the counting, that's the extent of their process. Scan the bin, scan the item, enter the quantity, move on to the next bin, and that's it. Now, of course, it does track serial numbers, lot numbers, and I can count by license plate as well. So I can count pallets without necessarily having to unpack it and counting each individual item on the pallet. I can just scan that license plate, and it'll count everything on that license plate for me automatically. Okay, so not much from a shop floor interface point of view to doing that inventory count. Now, if you sent guys out to do recounts and things like that, you can set up separate recount sheets. And then in this case, both for things like recounts and cycle counts, really what this is more of an instruction. So what the guys have to do is they have to go to these specific bins and scan these specific items. So that's fairly straightforward as well. All they do is they scan the bin. Let me pick one here. I'm going to recount this particular one, this bin there. So I scan that particular bin. It tells me which bin I'm at. I scan the item that I need to recount, and it asks me for the quantity that I'm recounting. Okay, so in this case, let's say it's 6 or something like that. Now that quantity that popped up, that quantity of 5 there, that was because I've already done the recount. You notice these guys here I haven't actually recounted yet because they're 0. But I can, and you can enter 0 as a count quantity as well. So potentially I have counted these and left them 0. In NAV, it indicates whether the item's been counted or not. Okay, so that's it for inventory counts. So whether it's a full count or a cycle count, very simple, saves a ton of time, and with the functionality within NAV for the reconciliation, that saves you a ton of time on analysis of the actual inventory count as well. Okay. Before we get to any questions that people may have, I'm going to just do one last little thing here. Because we did talk about this being for any NAV configuration, I'm going to scan that original configuration for the blue warehouse. In here, in NAV, this is the standard blue warehouse in the NAV demo data, doesn't even have bins enabled. So it's a location that's got no warehouse settings turned on at all, including bins, nothing, okay? So you'll see the difference. If I go into shipping, for example, and I go in and I look up a document, assuming I have any on this particular guy. So I'm just going to, I have no idea what that one is, but let's see. I'll bring up a document here, and this one happens to be a sales order, but it could be a transfer order or anything else. You'll notice that there's nothing to do with bins here. That bin column is hidden completely, and it's very simple. All I have to do is scan that item, enter the quantity, or just manually go in here and enter the quantity to ship, and that's all there is to it. Okay. So again, regardless of what location you've got set up, the system will adapt to it to the extent that you don't even need bins set up in order to use it. Okay. So anything from no bins all the way up to full directed pick and put away, the system will handle appropriately. And this would be this happens to be a transfer order receipt, but same idea, no bins or anything. I just scan the item, specify the quantity, and I'm off to the races. Okay? But everything else works exactly the same way. If I want to drill down on that particular item, I can. And the only difference here is it doesn't give me the breakdown by bin because I have no bins. It just tells me the total quantity available in that location. Okay? All right. With that, I think what we'll do is we'll open it up to any questions. I believe you can ask questions via the chat interface, or maybe Mike, you can let everybody know how they're supposed to ask the questions. Assuming Mike is available and not muted.
Can you hear me, Mark?
Yes.
All right, yeah. So I think we have one question for you, and it is, let's see. Question is from Greg. It says, does this run on a PC without NAV installed?
It could, yes. Generally, it's going to run on these handheld devices, of course, you know, dedicated handheld devices. But we do have a version that will run on a PC without NAV installed. Okay. Speaking of devices, the ones we're dealing with are these data logic, but we will run on Motorola, Honeywell, Intermec, whatever you have, as long as it's running Windows CE and up. We can also run, we have options for Android devices that have built-in barcode scanners as well for your outside sales guys and things like that. The warehouse guys should be using rugged devices like this. The best part of this is, with these data logic, we have a promotion with them going on where you can get everything I just showed you except for the advanced count and the license plating. So basically everything except, you know, this advanced module, get the standard inventory count module and the license plating with 2 devices for $5,000 plus the implementation and everything else. So normally these devices are, you know, they can be up to a couple $1,000 a piece. The ones that we're selling, their list price is $1,900 a piece. So you basically get 2 devices, a charger, and all the software for $5,000.
And it looks like that might be it for questions.
Okay, excellent. If you do have any other questions, you know, just get a hold of Solution Systems, and they'll be happy to answer them for you. And it was nice being able to present for you today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Have a great one.
All right, bye-bye.